El Paso, Texas, December 1932. Legendary Texas author and journalist Frank J. Dobie sits in his hotel room, impatiently glancing at the door every few minutes. He has spent a restless afternoon reviewing his notes and readying himself to receive a well-known guest he has long waited to interview. Finally, in the early evening, a knock comes at the hotel room door. Dobie opens the door and is greeted with the imposing frame and genteel smile of the legendary Texas cowboy he has heard so much about, yet never met. The man's name is Frank Collinson. He is an Englishman by birth, having come to Texas from his beloved homeland in 1872, when he was only 17 years old. He has spent the vast majority of his time since then living the hard, solitary, dangerous existence of a working cowboy on the Texas frontier. He is also, though, a lifelong reader, and a man with a profound proclivity for intellectual pursuits such as philosophy, science, and writing. Dobie and Collinson shake hands and exchange pleasantries as Dobie welcomes the elderly man into his room and out of the December chill. Dobie, already a noted authority on the history of Texas and the American Southwest, has sought Collinson out with the hopes of solving a mystery that he himself has been unable to answer despite years of research and investigation. After settling into a chair, Collinson, well aware of Dobie's reputation and record, wastes little time broaching the subject of Texas history and regional legend. Collinson asks whether or not Dobie ever got a chance to meet the legendary Texas Ranger William Bigfoot Wallace. Dobie responds that, regrettably, he never had the chance to meet the iconic Ranger face to face. But, he adds, he is well aware of his exploits. With this, Collinson leans into the lamplight, locking eyes with Dobie, a serious expression now drawn across his face. "Did you ever hear of Jeff Turner, the Indian hater?" he inquires. "Yes," replies Dobie, suddenly feeling unnerved, as if he is caught in an impromptu inquisition meant to suss out whether or not he is indeed worthy of the information, now stored only within the confines of Collinson's memory. "I have read about him in Duval's book on Bigfoot Wallace," referring to the 1871 publication, written by John C. Duval, entitled The Adventures of Bigfoot Wallace. Apparently satisfied, a knowing smile spreads across Collinson's face, and a sorrowful look takes hold of his eyes as his mind is momentarily lost in the glory and gore of days now long gone. "Does the book tell what became of Jeff Turner?" he asks. "No, and I have often wondered," replies Dobie, now situated unconsciously on the very edge of his hotel seat, already ensconced in the story about to be told. "Well, Bigfoot told me," Collinson opines, and then, as Dobie sits enthralled, begins to tell the tale of what actually happened to the legendary Texas wildman. Turner had come to Texas with his wife and children in the 1830s, and settled on a plot of land on the Guadalupe River. For a time the family had thrived on their small plot of land in the bucolic rolling hill country of central Texas. However, tragedy had struck one morning after Turner had gone out hunting alone. Texas was, at the time, one of the most dangerous locations on Earth. This was due to one predominant factor above all others, that of the mighty Comanche nation. The Comanche had ruled over this land for the better part of 2 centuries, and were feared by virtually all. Though more of a cohesive unit of bands than a cultural monolith, by the 1840s, the Comanche oversaw a veritable empire that spanned from southern Kansas to northern Mexico, as far west as Colorado, and as far east as the burgeoning city of Dallas, Texas. They have risen to prominence via decades of brutal raiding and warfare that saw countless men, women, and children fall to Comanche lances, arrows, and tomahawks, time and again, until their eventual capitulation and confinement to the reservation system in the 1870s. Comanche war parties would strike in brutal raids against any and all who occupied even the fringes of their territory. Whether the victims were Mexican settlers, Tonkawan villagers or Texan farmers, the standard operating procedure for a Comanche raid would routinely see all fighting-age males killed in horrific ways, infants often dispatched, and women and children summarily kidnapped and abused. Oftentimes whole families would simply be slaughtered, scalped, and left where they had fallen. Such had been the case for the terribly unfortunate Turner family. Jeff Turner had scarcely left his homestead more than half an hour before he heard the blood-curdling sounds of his wife and 3 boys under attack by the Comanche. Turner had sprinted back, only to find his wife and children's lifeless forms strewn about their cabin. When the attacking Comanche returned to finish him off, he had inflicted so much damage that, after believing they had mortally wounded him, the Comanches fled, leaving him for dead. But Turner had not died. He had survived, but his psyche had been irreparably scarred. After recovering for several months, under the care of charitable neighbors, Turner would move to a small camp on Chickaloth Creek, north of Victoria, Texas. His life from then on would revolve solely around exacting his revenge on the Comanche for the murder of his beloved family. He would head out alone, atop his trusted horse, a volatile jet-black Mustang named Pepper Pod, following any Comanche trail he could find in the whole of South Texas. He would pursue the Comanche at any opportunity, ambushing them individually on the trail or in watering holes. He would dispatch them with his lengthy hunting knife, scalp them, and cure the gruesome trophies inside his tent on Chickaloth Creek. For the next few years, Turner would appear sporadically at the Zumwalt settlement near present-day Sagan, Texas, in order to procure basic goods and sundries. Though he kept mostly to himself, his eyes would glitter, and his demeanor would become as animated as a vaudevillian actor when describing the intricacies of his macabre favorite pastime. It was these eyes and odd mannerisms that had so unnerved Bigfoot Wallace and his ranger company when they had crossed paths with Turner in 1840. Wallace and his cohorts had been in pursuit of Comanche horse thieves in South Texas when Turner had appeared, seemingly out of thin air, and offered to guide them through the country he knew so well. Though the party of young rangers were at first dubious as to how much help this seemingly derelict man would be, it would be less than a day later when Turner would prove his merit as both a tracker and a fighter. The party not only recouped their horses in a small but violent skirmish in South Texas, but all were witness to Turner's monomaniacal fury in battle against the Comanche. As they made their way back to the Zumwalt settlement, it was Turner alone whose belt was adorned with several freshly taken Comanche scalps. Wallace had been profoundly impacted by his interactions with Turner, being taken aback both by his story of personal tragedy, as well as the frightening intensity of his desire for revenge. But after his company had moved on from the Zumwalt settlement area, Bigfoot was left with only anecdotes and speculation as to the ultimate fate of the local legend, Jeff Turner. These he had passed along to Collinson. Neither had been included in Duval's account, as they were thought too gruesome for the sensibilities of its Victorian readership. In the first of these accounts, Turner is finally caught sleeping by the Comanche in a remote South Texas cold camp in the middle of the night. He is well known among the entirety of the Comanche tribe as a near-feral and wildly vicious white man who had scalped many of their people. He is also, though, regarded as a man with a fierce fighting heart. This, even as an enemy combatant, made him useful to the Comanche. In the theological worldview of the Comanche, there is no singular great spirit to be worshipped. Instead, they believe there to be a universal medicine or power, known as Puha, that the Comanche believe to reside in all natural things, from rocks to buffalo. In Turner's case, it is his heart that is believed to hold great power. Thus, once Turner is confined as a Comanche prisoner, he is treated even more harshly than most, Turner is bound and brought to the camp of a major chief within the band. He is dragged to the door of the chief's lodge, inside which resides the chief, along with his pregnant wife. The morning sun has not long hung in the Texas sky, but already its repressive heat has begun to exact its toll on the already battered and bedraggled prisoner. The flap, which serves as the door of the tepee, suddenly swings open, and out steps an imposing middle-aged man, whose face is creased from both the withering of time and his scarcely concealable rage. The chief closely examines the features and stature of this heated T-boat, the Comanche's name for the whites, as the warriors surrounding the chief and Turner taunt and sneer at their captive. The chief motions for them to commence with the ritual at hand. Turner is thrown to the ground, where he is beaten and clubbed further still, as the lashings that bind his hands are undone, and 4 warriors grab him. Turner is held down, as each of his arms and legs are tethered to wooden stakes, buried deep into the hard ground. Turner, for his part, remains silent, though perpetually wide-eyed throughout. As the taunts and insults are hurled at him from assembled villagers, and blows continue to rain down upon him at varying intervals from warriors who had been so long aggrieved by his antics, it is possible that Turner's thoughts turn to his late wife and children. Then, as if on cue, the assembled Comanche villagers and warriors go silent. The chief now walks over to the door of his lodge and again swings it open. Except this time, his wife emerges from the cavernous darkness inside. She is slightly younger than the chief, possessive of a dignified natural beauty, and in the latter stages of pregnancy. She is richly adorned in paint and feathers, and, instead of the perpetual disdain that contorts her husband's face, her expression is one of placid indifference. She is brought forth towards Turner's position by 2 female handlers, and sat down perhaps a yard away from the increasingly unnerved Texan, whose breathing rate is beginning to increase by the second. As the sun begins its final ascension towards its noontime apex, the brutal ceremony at hand reaches its climax. The chief brandishes a large hunting knife, meant for the butchering of buffalo. For an agonizing few minutes, Turner is taunted with up-close shows of the frightful blade in mock attacks. Finally, Turner is cruelly dismembered at the hands of the Comanche chief, with his heart being removed, and then served to his wife, who consumes it in the belief that it will make their unborn child strong and brave. Turner's remains are unceremoniously disposed of, and he is never seen again in the Zumwalt settlement. In the second version of Turner's demise, Turner is said to have been briefly paired with a like-minded frontiersman named Smoky, who shares Turner's penchant and proclivity for collecting Comanche scalps. One day, as they are ranging around the Texas hill country, the duo come upon a family being attacked by a Comanche raiding party. Turner and Smoky are able to draw the attention and ire of the raiding party, who give up their raid on the family and pursue the 2 men after the pair shot down 2 of the Comanche warriors from a distance. Turner and Smoky then flee into what proves to be a box canyon, a natural, steeply walled enclosure with no way out, save for the way the 2 men had come in. With the sun sinking and darkness rapidly approaching, the men are able to find a small cave, about as wide in circumference as a wooden barrel, into which they crawl one after the other. After crawling back into the cave a few yards, the tunnel opens up slightly so that the men can inch along in a crouched position. They advance further into the cave, seeking to put as much distance between themselves and their Comanche pursuers as possible. Turner takes the lead as the men move forward at a tortuously slow pace in total darkness. Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of a rattlesnake's rattle whirs out within the tight confines of the cave. Both men stop instantly. Turner has a book of Mexican wax matches in his pocket. He retrieves one and strikes it, illuminating a truly nightmarish scene. No more than 10 feet away from the men is a writhing mass of diamondback rattlesnakes, with some branching off and slithering closer towards them, while others flee deeper into the cave. With no better solution, both men hold their crouched positions, motionless. Minutes drag by, with the men fearful that any move will draw a strike from one of the venomous creatures. Suddenly, though, Turner's leg spasms, forcing him to shift his weight ever so slightly. But this adjustment, however minute, is still enough to draw the attention of one of the increasingly agitated diamondbacks. The animal strikes Turner, sealing his fate. "Smoky," whispers the terrified Turner, "I've lifted my last scalp. With the Comanche prowling outside, an attempted escape is an implausible option. All Smoky can do is stay with his friend as Turner expires. Within a short time, Turner begins to twist and contort, limited only by the confines of the earth and walls. He then begins to hallucinate. He grabs Smoky's arm and confides in a hushed, panicked tone, "Look, there's a hole in the ground right in front of me. It's a skylight to hell, and I wonder why the devil left it uncovered." Then, in the words of Frank J. Dobie's own account of the event titled, "Between the Comanche and the Rattlesnake, an extravagance seized that would have satisfied any exhorter holding a center over brimstone furnaces," he described his own advance into the torture of heat and power of hellish beings. By the time the sun rises again, Turner's body is cold and dead. The rattlesnake horde has rescinded further into the cave, while the Comanche war party has moved on. Smoky does his best to respectfully inter Turner's remains in a makeshift grave near Fort Phantom Hill, near present-day Abilene, Texas, though we can never be fully sure of exactly how the legendary Jeff Turner, the Indian hater, lost his life. It is safe to say that he likely expired the same way that he had lived, ensnared in a noxious cycle of violence and anger. And while Turner's legend certainly stands out, as he is even known by many elderly residents of Texas to this day, the tragedy and torment that so unfortunately encapsulated his life are not at all unique in the experience of the Old West, and in Texas in particular. The tales of violence, vengeance, and retribution carried out upon and at the behest of the Comanche, the Texans, the Mexicans, the Apache, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, the Kiowa, and the Spanish in Texas' long and storied history are, to be sure, too numerous to cover in one episode. Rest assured that we will certainly do our best to cover these important events in as much depth and breadth as possible. But for tonight, they are other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes, as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking the Join button, or click the link in the description below to become a member on Patreon. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.